Today we're going to talk about the best LiteSpeed cache settings, and before everything else, why LiteSpeed, right? Why not Nginx or Apache? Now, I've done some extensive research while trying to figure out which is the best, the fastest, and the cheapest WordPress web hosting. If you're interested in that video, you can check it out right here. Through that process, I found that web hosting providers using LiteSpeed servers have an advantage over servers using Nginx and Apache. Servers like A2, Qualo, and DreamHost uses LiteSpeed web servers, and they rank significantly higher than servers like SiteGround or WPX that uses Nginx and Apache. This was supported by benchmark testing done by some independent research, such as this article from ChemiCloud. Using the same server specifications, it is found that response times from LiteSpeed is much faster. The request per second, which means how many requests can the server process in a second, it shows that LiteSpeed is faster, and LiteSpeed is faster in terms of the transfer rate as well. So when it comes to site speed, LiteSpeed server is the server you want to use for the best optimal site speed optimization. Plus, if you used a LiteSpeed server, it comes with a free caching plugin called LiteSpeed Cache. You're probably using it, that's why you're checking out this video. It works best with the LiteSpeed servers, but it still works with Nginx and Apache, but not to the optimal. Anyway, with the free LiteSpeed Cache plugin, you get basically everything you get from WP Rocket. For example, the image optimization, WebP images, JS optimization, CSS optimization, database optimization, and even a free CDN called QuickCloud. So this is a full solution as long as your sites are running on a LiteSpeed server, and the best part of it, it is free. Now you know why LiteSpeed is superior, let's talk about the settings. Hey, this is Jack, and if this is your first time watching a video from my channel, I do a lot of WordPress and online business tutorials, and my main focus is to help you get a 90+ score on your core web vitals so that your content can rank better. So if any of these topics align with your interests, feel free to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell notification so you won't miss any of my content. Now the thing is, with any of these caching plugins, the best settings are to have everything turned on. Literally, that's the best setting. But the next question is, does it break your site? That's why when you're doing site speed optimization with a caching plugin, especially when you're turning on settings for JavaScript and CSS optimization, you need to be very careful. What I recommend is to turn on one setting, one at a time, and after that you want to clear your server cache, and then you want to check if that setting breaks your site. If it does, then keep that setting turned off until you figure out how to counter that problem. That is literally the best advice for beginners to get into site speed optimization. Anyway, let me walk you through all the settings available in the LiteSpeed Cache plugin and explain to you what they do so you know whether or not you need it on your site. Let's hop on over to my computer. This is the site I'm optimizing, and before everything else, we need to do an inspection of the site. Let's do it with Google PageSpeed Insights, and this is the page we are going to optimize and test. As you can see, there is lots of content, there is a video embedded on this page, and there's lots of stuff here. As you can see, it's a long form content. So let's copy this link and analyze. And on the back end, you can actually see that there is no speed optimization plugin or caching plugin installed, and the score we are getting on mobile is 85. These are the data. We need to work on the first contentful paint, the largest contentful paint, and the speed index. And as for the desktop version, we're getting a 95, which is not bad, and the only thing we need to work on is the speed index. Now let's first install the LiteSpeed Cache plugin. And here we are. Let's go to the dashboard. As you can see, this is a summary of the plugin. It will tell you how much usage you are using for image optimization, for the page optimization, and the CDN bandwidth. These are the services provided by the LiteSpeed Cache. Let's go to the first set of settings, which is the general settings. Now, as with any WordPress plugins, if you're not comfortable with automatic updates, you can keep this off. And the important thing when using LiteSpeed Cache is that it provides a free CDN called QuickCloud. If you don't know what CDN means, it basically stores part of the content of your website across different locations in the world. So it will serve content much faster for international users. If you don't have a CDN or content delivery network for your website, the content will be loaded from your web host directly. And if the site visitor lives in another part of the world, the loading time of your site will be much higher. So this Quick Cloud CDN is built on top of the LiteSpeed servers, so it works best with LiteSpeed. If you visit their homepage, you can see that they are the first and only content delivery network with the ability to cache dynamic WordPress pages. Popular CDNs like Cloudflare can only cache static pages. If your site is a simple website with little to no functionalities, you can use Cloudflare and they work perfectly for those sites. But for sites like listing sites, booking sites, e-commerce sites, or any websites that serves content based on the interactivity of the users, in other words, dynamic pages, Quick Cloud is better for those sites. Anyway, let's continue with this. To utilize the Quick Cloud CDN, you need to have a domain key, which can be obtained by clicking on this button. Once you click on that, you will see this message. You need to wait for a while and refresh this page. As you can see, it will tell you how long more you have to wait. And after that time, let's refresh this again. And you will see that the domain key is auto-filled. I recommend that you connect this domain key to your Quick Cloud account. If you don't have an account, you can click on this button. And since I don't have a Quick Cloud account, let's create one together. Let's add an email address, put in a password, click on this and register. Now you have to check your email and activate that account. And once that is activated, you can visit the dashboard over here. As you can see, my domain has been connected with Quick Cloud. So Quick Cloud is generally free to use. We'll talk more about that in a while. But for now, let's continue with this. Once you have this domain key, you'll be unlocked to more optimization options. I'll show them to you in a while as well. For this guest mode, I will recommend turning this on because this is an optimization for first-time users to your website. What it will do is to serve a default version of your web page before crawling the up-to-date version. This in turn produces a super fast response time from your server. But the problem with turning this on is that there is a short delay between the default cache page being served and the correct content loaded via Ajax. And this could mean the wrong language, incorrect pricing, or other problematic content may be displayed for just a short period of time. So you have to decide if you want to accept this trade-off. It is really up to your comfort level. You can try this out with your site before deciding if you want to keep this turned on. Next, I recommend you to turn this guest optimization on. This will enhance the page optimization from the guest mode. If you want to learn more about how these guest modes work, you can click on this link right here. Next, you can add your server IP address. This will speed up the connection between your site visitor's browser and your server. And if you don't know what your server IP address is, just click on this and your server IP will show. Let's copy this and paste it here. For notifications, you can turn it off if you don't want to receive promotions or marketing communications from LiteSpeed. But if you want to keep yourself up to date, feel free to keep this on. Let's save changes. And next, let's go to the cache settings. Now we are at the cache settings, and if you don't know what caching means, you have to understand it because it is the most fundamental when it comes to page speed optimization. So let me take some time to explain this. So the layman's term for caching is like pre-making something so that you can serve it much faster later on. Like how some restaurants will pre-make their food and store it at one place so that you can serve it much faster when there is an order. We can never get that in Gordon Ramsay's restaurant. That's why their food is served much slower because they are made to order. So it is exactly the same thing with caching. Your web hosting server will capture a version of your website and then store it at one place so that when the browser is requesting for the web page to load or to be displayed, your server will serve that stored version to the browser. If there is no caching, it means that your server will have to work a lot harder because every time there is a request, it has to load the entire website over and over again. Web pages and food aren't the same. Made to order for web pages doesn't mean better quality. So that's the explanation for caching, but now there is a caching policy. In layman's term, it means how long you are going to keep that frozen food before you discard it and make a new batch of it. And in techie terms, how long are you going to store this version of your website on the server? Now that you understand what caching means, it is important that you turn all this on so that it will free up your server resources. By default, these are turned on, but the cache mobile is not. Just take note that caching is more efficient for the server, but it does take up some server resources. If you turn this cache mobile on, it will store an additional version of your website on top of the current cache version, which is the desktop version. So the more versions of your website that is cached, the more it eats up the server resources. If you look at the documentation, you can see that this is meant for non-responsive themes with mobile-specific design. There are other scenarios over here, and because you have turned on the guest mode and guest optimization, you should be turning this on. Now next, the rest over here are quite technical and specific to some pages you do or do not want to cache. These settings are site specific, so I will not cover this. The general idea is to not cache user specific data such as the account details or pages with credit card information. Any pages you see using that information, you want to add the URLs here. And if you're using some tracking codes like the UTM or these, LiteSpeed cache will usually not cache those data by default. Let's save changes. And let's move on to TTL, which means time to life. Remember the analogy I mentioned about how long to store your food before you discard it away? This is where you can control that information. But these are specific to pages such as your front page or whatever pages you have defined earlier. I'll just leave them as it is. The default settings shouldn't go wrong. Let's go to the next. Now purge is basically to clear whatever that is stored on the cache. And I think these default settings are fine. For excludes, there is nothing to do here for most sites. If you have a reason to exclude certain pages or objects, you can do them here. For ESI, it controls how specific elements on dynamic pages are cached. If you have included some URLs and objects to be cached or not to be cached in the earlier settings, you can control them here, but generally I'll keep this turned off and I'll leave the rest as it is. Let's go to Object Cache. Object Cache basically caches your database. The hosting plan I'm using does not allow object caching, and that's why you're seeing this connection test as failed. But honestly, if you are not building pages using PHP, you don't need this. But if your server allows for it, then turn it on. For the method, there are memcache and Redis. Personally, I prefer Redis because it offers richer functionalities and it is better for complex use cases. And as for the rest, I'll leave them as it is. But I will keep this turned off because when you're doing some back-end work, we don't want to work with cached content. Sometimes it will serve outdated content, which is going to be frustrating for administrators. So I will keep this WP admin off. Let's save changes. And let's go to browser caching. I will turn this browser cache on. This will store static content to your site visitor's browser so that if they visit your website again, the resources will be loaded from their browser instead of loading it from your server. So this is much faster for repeat visitors. For the browser cache TTL, LiteSpeed recommends this, so I will leave it as it is. This should allow you to not get flagged from Google PageSpeed Insights for not having an efficient caching policy. Let's save changes. And let's go to the advanced setting. I'll leave the login cookie as it is. This is only needed if you have multiple websites installed on the same domain and you need the cache to distinguish who is logged into which WordPress site. Complicated stuff, but I think you'll hardly use this. For this setting, I will leave it as it is because you should only be using the HTTPS version of your site. I would recommend that you force HTTPS if you haven't done so. That way you will not have this problem. So I'll keep this setting off. Now for this instant click, it is quite straightforward. If the site visitor hovers to a link before clicking it, your server will start preloading that page, hence making it faster for your visitors to visit the next page. It makes sense to turn it on, but just take note that it will eat up your server resources. If you have a large website but limited server resources, this will have adverse impact on the sites hosted on the same server. So just to prevent that from happening, I think your site visitors can wait a little bit for the next page to load. So I'll keep this off. Let's save changes. Now if you have WooCommerce installed on your site, you will have this cache settings. I will keep this ESI for cart off. For product update interval, just remember less purging means faster websites and frequent purging consumes server resources. And with that in mind, just think about which suits your business. I would prefer the second. The rest I'll keep it as it is. Let's save changes. And we are basically done with the cache settings. Next, let's move on to the CDN settings. Now let's get on with the CDN settings. We will set up the Quick Cloud CDN by turning this on. And then next you want to go to the Quick Cloud dashboard, click on your domain, and then under CDN, you will see this error if the Quick Cloud CDN is not enabled on the plugin itself, which I did. So maybe a refresh will work. I think I forgot to save changes. And let's refresh this. And here we go. Now we are able to enable CDN. You can choose either method for your domain to connect to Quick Cloud CDN. I will use the CNAME method. Let's confirm choice. You gotta go to the DNS zone editor for your domain to add this information in. So for me, I'm using A2 and A2 uses cPanel. So if you're using a server that uses cPanel as well, it's going to be similar. You need to click on this DNS zone editor. select the domain, and over at the zone records, select CNAME, and you'll see this here. This should be quite similar, but if you don't have this CNAME record, you can actually add it here. But for me, I'll just edit this. And what I want to do is to go to Quick Cloud and copy this and paste it here. Let's save record. And then because the www.jackchow.com version of the website is pointed to the CDN, we need to go to the WordPress backend. And under settings, let's go to general. And over here, we want to put this as HTTPS and as well as the www dot, your domain name. The same goes for this. And we're done. Let's save changes. Let's go back to Quick Cloud and let's hit continue. And we'll get this OK message. If this is done correctly, let's go back to my domains and select this. Let's select CDN, and under CDN config, the dynamic cache we want it on, the static cache we want it on as well. Under enable quick backend, we want to turn this on. And then we're gonna wait about 24 hours for the DNS to propagate. Then we'll probably see an OK status for the CDN. This will show that your CDN is working. So that's basically it for configuring the Quick Cloud CDN. Let's save changes and let's move on to the image optimization. Now, as for image optimization, let's go to the settings. For this auto request clone, you want to turn this on so that uploaded images will be optimized automatically. The auto pull clone should be turned on as well. Now, for this optimized original images, normally when you optimize an image, an additional image is created. So there will be an optimized version and the original image. If you turn this on, it means that you want the original image to be optimized as well. But most of the time, what is displayed on the page is the optimized version of the image. The original image serves as a backup. But if you're confident that the quality of the optimized image is good enough, you don't need the original image anymore. You can remove the original backups by turning this on. And if that is the case, you don't need to turn this optimized original images on, because you're going to delete the original image anyway. So it's really up to you to decide. For me, I usually optimize my images manually using kraken.io before I upload them to my site. So the quality of the optimized version of my images will usually be close to the original image I've uploaded. So this is the setting that I will use. But if you want to rely on the LiteSpeed cache to optimize the image for you, then I would recommend that you do this instead. But just take note that having two of the same images on your website actually eats up the server resources. That's why I usually optimize my images before I upload them. And hence this is the setting I will use. For this optimized losslessly, you gotta understand that there are two types of image optimization. There are lossy and lossless. Lossy will put more focus on reducing the size of the image, but the image quality may be compromised. And for lossless, it puts the quality of the image as priority, but the file size may be much bigger than lossy. So by default, if this is turned off, the image optimization method is lossy. But if you turn this on, the method will be lossless. So the quality will be much higher, but the file size will be much bigger. So depending on what your site does, if it is a photography site where the image quality matters, you may want to turn this on. But if your site is an affiliate site, for example, and the quality of the images doesn't really matter, as long as it is visible, in that case, you want to keep this off. As for this, basically if your image has embedded information such as keywords, copyright and stuff, turning this off means that all the information will be gone for the optimized version of your image. This will reduce the file size of the image, but the adverse impact is that you lose a little advantage in terms of the image SEO. Personally, I will keep this on to preserve that information. Now, create WebP version. This is a must because it drastically reduces the file size of your image on the page. And of course, you want to turn this on as well, so that the JPEGs or the PNGs on your website will be replaced with the WebP version you have created. Now, as for this WebP for extra source set, let me try to explain what this is. This deals a lot with the resizing of images in different devices. By default, WordPress will use one image that you upload and it will be displayed across different devices. So sometimes it may look out of proportion. This source set element allows WordPress users to have multiple images to be used in the same placeholder. On desktop, it may use image 1, on laptop, it may use image 2, and on mobile, it may use image 3. So by default, if you keep this off, some of your images using the source set element may not be converted to WebP. So you want to turn this on. Next, I'll leave this as it is. Let's save changes and move on to page optimization. Let's start with the CSS settings. We definitely want to turn the CSS Imagify on because this will remove any unnecessary characters from the CSS files. Now for the next 4 settings over here, they work closely with each other. Take it that CSS Combine is the parent and the rest, like the generate UCSS, which basically means unique CSS, this UCSS inline, and the CSS Combine external and inline are child of the CSS Combine. If you turn the CSS Combine on, all these should be turned on as well for the best possible result. But if the CSS Combine is turned off, there is really no use in turning either of these settings on. Basically, if you look at Google PageSpeed Insights without combining CSS or JavaScripts, you'll see a lot of CSS files listed separately. But I know this is for JavaScripts, it is exactly the same with CSS. And if you combine them by switching this on, you will see only one CSS file. This is just for example. This website is using the AutoOptimize plugin to optimize the CSS files, and when you optimize them, you'll only see one CSS files. They'll combine every single thing into one file. Now sometimes turning this on might cause your site to break, so it's best for you to try this setting out before keeping this setting. And then we have the generate UCSS, which relies on a quick cloud to create a streamlined CSS file for each page of your site. By streamlined, I mean it will only include the CSS that is needed to load a specific page, hence reducing unused CSS. But take note that if you have a large website, you need to ensure that you have enough web storage to keep the generated UCSS. If you have the cache mobile turned on, this setting will also create an additional generated UCSS file specifically for the mobile. So just take note of that, but no doubt it will be beneficial in terms of site speed. Next, we have the UCSS inline, which elevates the generated UCSS as it stores the generated UCSS inline with the HTML rather than as a separate CSS file, hence reducing extra CSS file loading. If you have turned the above 2 settings on, it makes sense that you turn this on as well. For this, by default, only combines the local CSS files. With this turned on, the external CSS files and those CSS that are in line with the HTML created by this will be combined together, which minimizes the potential errors caused by the CSS Combine. As I mentioned, this might break your website when done individually, and hence this might help. So if all the above are turned on, this will give your site a much better performance in terms of speed and stability. But of course, it is always down to trial and error when it comes to optimization. Load CSS asynchronously. I will recommend turning this on as it will load CSS and HTML at the same time. For this CSS per URL, if turned on, it will generate critical CSS per post types. For example, if you have a unique post type like reviews or listing, it will generate critical CSS for the entire post types instead of individual pages. This saves your disk space and quota, but if you are using a page builder, you might experience incorrect CSS styling because some page builders have a separate set of CSS for each page. So you might want to test this out to see if it works if you are using a page builder. As for this will avoid render blocking as defined here, so I'll turn this on. For font display optimization, especially when you are using Google fonts on your site, you should switch this to swap. This basically means if the Google fonts are not loaded in time, the browser will display a web save font first. So when a Google font is loaded, the web save font will be swapped out by the Google font. It will help to avoid this issue on Google PageSpeed Insights. Let's save changes. And let's go to JS settings. Similar to Imagify CSS, this will remove all unnecessary characters from the JavaScript code without altering its functionality. It makes sense to turn this on. For JS Combine, it is a little more complicated than combining CSS. Some JavaScripts need to load first before the rest of the page loads. So by combining JavaScripts, it might cause conflicts in terms of the load priority of the script. So I would recommend keeping this off. However, if you want to combine JavaScript, then you will also want to turn the combine external and inline JS as it helps maintain the priority of JS execution. So these 2 settings work hand in hand. If you keep the JS combine off, there is no point in keeping this on. And if you want to keep this 2 setting on, it's best that you test it to see if it breaks your site. For me, this is my recommended setting. As for load JS deferred, I would prefer to have it as deferred as it improves the performance of your site, but it may break your website. So again, please test it out to see if it works on your site and if it improves your site performance. If you don't understand what JS deferred or delay means, check out the video on the top right. Let's save this and let's go to the HTML settings. Same thing as CSS and JavaScript minify, this setting does exactly the same, so turn this on. As for this DNS prefetch, it loads third-party requests before it is requested. A good example would be Google Fonts, Google Tags, Analytics, and if you are displaying ads, you will probably have the double-click URL from AdSense. So to utilize the DNS prefetch on Google PageSpeed Insights, under Reduce the Impact of Third-Party Code, you will have a list of external domains that are loading on your site. So if you prefetch the resources from those third parties beforehand, it will make your site load a lot faster. For the DNS prefetch control, I will turn this on to prefetch assets from any third-party sites your site is connected to. So if you don't want to manually enter all these onto this section, you can just turn this on. I think this makes more sense. For this, you can lazy load any HTML content by an ID or class. Remove query strings won't have much impact on site speed as this is rather outdated, so I will keep this off. Load Google Fonts asynchronously. I will turn this on if you are using Google Fonts on your site. It pre-connects to Google, hence making your site load a little faster. I would say it wouldn't make much difference because generally Google Fonts load exceptionally fast. So turning this on or off, it really doesn't matter. Remove Google Fonts, I will keep this off, especially when you are using Google Fonts. You can turn this on if you are hosting your fonts locally. Next, as for this remove WordPress emoji, it is a must to turn this on because this is a critical cause of site speed, especially when your site allows for user-generated content like a forum or comments. For this, turning it on will result in a smaller page size, but some functions will be lost when your site visitors are using older browsers. For me, I will keep this off to cater for everybody. Let's save changes and let's move on to the media settings. Lazy load images, I will turn this on. And for this basic image placeholder, it will display a gray background on your images before it is loaded. For example, this, before the image is loaded, you will have this gray placeholder. This is done by default, so you don't need to do anything about it. For this responsive placeholder, I want to turn this on so that the images will have a specific placeholder on different devices before it is loaded. This will help to reduce the cumulative layout shift. The responsive placeholder SVG, I will keep this as it is. This is self-explanatory. You can determine the background color of the placeholder. For this, I will keep this off if your site is not visually dependent like an affiliate site. But if it is, for example, a photography site where the file size of your image is large, I will turn this on so that the lower quality of the original image will be displayed first. When the higher quality image is loaded, it will replace the lower quality image. For this, you can control the quality of the low quality image. Doesn't make sense to make it more than 10. I think 4 is a good spot. As for this, you do not want to make the dimensions too big as any images smaller than this dimension will not get a lower quality image served first. It makes sense to keep this dimension as small as possible. And for this, I would turn this on if you are using this cloud generator. But because I am not, I will turn this off. Lazy load iframes, I will turn this on. This will help with site performance, especially when you embed videos from third-party sources like YouTube or Vimeo. And for this missing sizes, I will turn this on. Some images may not have explicit width and height and will usually be flagged by Google PageSpeed Insights. Turning this on will solve that issue. For this, I will turn this on, especially when your lazy load images is turned on. Basically, lazy loading will require some JavaScripts to be loaded. And when you turn this on, the JavaScript will be in line with the HTML of your page, hence reducing the number of requests and hence making your site load faster. Let's save changes and let's move on to the media excludes. Now for this section, this is in case you do not want any particular assets to be lazy loaded. Then you can add them here. There's nothing much to discuss about. Let's go to localization. For Gravatar cache, I will turn this on especially when you allow comments on your site. Generally, when you allow comments, these profile pics will be taken from the WordPress Gravatar, which is an external resource. So if you turn this on, it will store those profile images locally, allowing your site to load a little faster. You want to turn this on as well, and this is the cache lifespan of your Gravatar. It will refresh automatically after a week. I think this is fine to keep as it is. Let's save changes. And over at tuning, I think there is nothing much to discuss here unless you want to customize those settings previously made. So let's go to database. Now the key here is to make your site as slick as possible, which means you gotta keep your database clean. I highly recommend that you back up your site before you clean up your database here. As you can see, there are several stuff that you can clear, like the post revisions. Every edit you made to your live articles, they will be kept in the database until you clear it. The auto drafts are basically the article drafts that were automatically saved, spam commands, expired transients, which are basically the cache files that were expired, and all these stuff over here. So clearing them would generally help with your site performance. If we go to the database optimization settings, you can set the maximum number of revisions to keep. For example, if you constantly make revisions to your published article, your database will only store the most recent revisions up to the number you specify. Making this 0 means the database will store as many revisions as you make. You can also set how long you want to keep a revision. Now, I can't give you a number here, but I prefer to keep all these at 0. And I make a habit to clear the database once every month. And that's basically it for the optimization. Now let's test the same page. As you can see, I've created this tutorial over a couple of days, and such big change has been made to Google PageSpeed Insights. And here we go. We have a performance of 100 for mobile, and for desktop, we have 100 performance as well. So that's basically it for the best LiteSpeed cache setting. I hope this video helped, and if it does, please do me a favor and smash that thumbs up button. It will really help this video reach out to others who need this information. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell notification for more WordPress tutorials and online business content. My name is Jack. I'll see you in the next video.